Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah Trushanecki. I am the Principal Product Marketing Manager for our Azure Solutions here at Veeam. I'm joined today by Sebastian Onofre. He is one of our Senior Insight Systems Engineers on our cloud team. And we're really excited today to talk about what's new in Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure V5. Depending on if you're joining us live or if you're catching us on a recording, version 5 may be available. It might still be waiting. So be sure to take a look at veeam.com for all of the latest information about general availability. But whether or not it's available or not, we certainly have a lot we can cover for you. Today, we're going to talk about what's new in the solution, specifically taking a look at immutable backup and other scalability enhancements. I'm then going to turn it over to Sebastian to show you what the product looks like in its latest version. So we're going to walk you through some of the basics of deployment, configuration, backup, and recovery, and showcase what's new so that you can see how you can build a more resilient cloud for your organization. To start, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. This call is being recorded, so as I said, for folks watching on the recording, this is being recorded, but for those live, we'll be sure to send out the recording and the slides a few days after today's presentation. You all are muted upon entry, so we won't be taking questions live at this time, but we will be in the chat answering your questions as they come along. So please use the chat. Let us know what questions you have. Let us know if you've tried the solution before, if this is your first time taking a look at it, if you have any kind of cloud configuration questions. We're two cloud experts. We're super happy to help. But with that, let's go ahead and get started talking about Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. And I like to start by first kind of orienting our strategy for these cloud native solutions. In our most recent Data Protection Trends report, which is a third-party run research report that Veeam sponsors, surveying about 4,500 organizations. In that latest Data Protection Trends report, we found that there continues to be a profound shift in the mix of how servers are hosted within organizations of all sizes. Pre-COVID, we found that there was a pretty healthy mix of a third of servers in a kind of physical server environment, a third were virtualized so that those resources were well allocated, and then a third were hosted in some sort of hyperscale or sovereign cloud. And we expected some cloud shift over the years, but I think COVID really accelerated those measures. So if you see here in 2022 and 2023, the mix is probably about half of all servers are hosted in the cloud, and the mix of physical and virtual is kind of diminishing. That doesn't mean that there aren't new workloads being hosted physical or virtual. Of course, data continues to explode as we become a more data-driven society. But the mix of what starts in or gets refactored to the cloud is becoming increasingly cloudy. And so as an organization, we're really thinking about how do we enable our end users in this new world of hybrid architectures, with some data running on-prem, some data running in the cloud, and a lot of organizations working on 2, 3, 4-year plans to figure out how they can refactor applications to put more and more in Azure VMs, in SQL databases running in Azure, because ultimately the cloud offers the elasticity and high availability that so many organizations are really looking for. So that's really how we're thinking about things. Let's then talk about if that data is running in the cloud, what are organizations doing about it? In our Cloud Protection Trends report, another research report that we sponsor, we found that 61% of survey respondents rely on built-in backups of cloud storage. So that means that when we say, hey, how are you backing up your Azure VMs? The answer is often, I'm scheduling snapshots. And for those of us on the call who are backup experts, might be feeling a little bit of cringe because we know that that can be an incredibly expensive design structure, right? It's expensive, it's cumbersome, and it doesn't really consider the sort of portability and migration that might be required to move data to lower cost storage like object storage, or to even exfiltrate from the cloud. Now, of course, snapshots are great for recovery point objectives, recovery time objectives. So snapshots, I think, will continue to play an important part in the resiliency of cloud hosted data, but there's got to be a better way. And I think with Veeam, we know the answer. is backup for sure. Now, it's always important on these kinds of webinars to talk a little bit about the shared responsibility model. This idea that every cloud provider has an agreement with every organization to say, here's the things we're responsible for, but here's the things you're responsible for. And ultimately, protection of data really lies with the customer. So even Azure would recommend a third-party backup solution to make sure that you have that kind of resilient architecture in addition to the high availability and elasticity and networking and all the great things that Azure provides as a service. So to do that, let's talk about Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. Our Azure solutions have a host of incredible capabilities, whether that be tiering out to object storage to reduce costs, or having policy-based approach to backup and recovery, so you're not managing individual agents. But when we think about the so what of those capabilities, I think of them in three kind of categories. The first is all about security. As more and more organizations are finding that ransomware and cybersecurity are becoming top of mind for their organization, cloud hosted data and even cloud backups are becoming more and more of a target. So thinking about how do we improve identity and access management? How do we leverage immutable backups in Azure storage? That's really to the core of what we're trying to drive from the core product as well as our latest innovations. And then we're thinking about recovery. You know, the recovery point objectives and the recovery time objective of snapshots are great, but how can we maybe make granular recovery easier to execute? How do we have portable recovery so you can recover to other locations? These are all considerations that we have when we're bringing this solution to market. And then the other thing that I think Seb and I spent a lot of time talking about is the fact that this solution is really zero compromise for all kinds of users. If you're a backup administrator and you're thinking, how do I back up the cloud? This solution is going to feel very similar to the other Veeam solutions that you manage today. So rather than having to learn some brand new tool with a bunch of new workflows, you're going to be able to leverage the same Veeam DNA that you know and trust. But on the flip side, if you're trying to convince maybe your Azure architect or Azure engineer, hey, Veeam Backup, this third-party tool is really the answer, they may wonder, is it really for the cloud, or is it this bolted on technology that doesn't make sense in the cloud? And what we've done here is really considered cloud native best practices in the design. So really leveraging all of the power that is in that Azure stack and making sure that those backup techniques and the recovery principles are cloud native, so it doesn't feel like a bolted on solution. And that means that there's no compromises, right? This ends up being the best solution for everybody involved. So let's go ahead and break that down. As I said, at the core of this offering is security. So we're making it easy to do things that in the cloud may not be inherent, things like isolated backups. In the data center world, it's obvious that the backups are isolated. You're backing up to a repository. You then may scale out to tape. And that all has the inherent separation in the structure. But in the cloud, where that infrastructure is abstracted, you have to put logical separation into your workflows. And Veeam makes it easy to do that, to back up to a different Azure account, right? So that you're separating on that level. Backing up to a different Azure zone so that you have that kind of resiliency built in. That makes it easy for you to then execute those kinds of resilient backups and focus on some of the other aspects of how you can make this solution secure, whether that be least privilege access and using role-based access controls, or even critical integrations with services like Azure Key Vault, so that ultimately your data is encrypted and maintains its integrity. Next, let's talk about recovery. For those of you who are Veeam Power users, it's, again, the same principles that you know and love in Veeam Backup and Replication pulled into the cloud. So full and file level recovery, simple wizards so that you can just execute recoveries painlessly. But what's nice about this solution is that it's also, as I mentioned earlier, recovery to anywhere. So recovery across Azure subscriptions, recovery across Azure regions. You can even recover out of Azure back to on-premises. So it has the portability that a first-party tool like Azure Backup simply can't cover. And then finally, as I said, that zero compromise. So whether that means the peace of mind for you as a backup admin to take a policy-based approach to backup, or having the peace of mind of someone like the cloud team saying, how do I cut down my Azure bill? Being able to lifecycle manage your backups from Azure Blob to archive storage, and it even has built-in cost calculations. So there's something in it for every kind of team that would be interacting with this solution. So that's a kind of overview of what Veeam Backup for Azure has to offer. Let's talk about how we're innovating with this latest release in version 5. To start, the #1 showcasing feature that we are so excited about is support for immutable backups. Now, if you haven't had a chance to see our Veeam Backup and Replication version 12 latest enhancements, this is a good plug to mention that we now have full support for immutable storage in Azure Blob. We spent a tremendous amount of time working closely with Microsoft's R&D teams to make sure that we're bringing all of the promise of immutability into the workflows you love and trust. So in Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure, you can now use worm state logic, so write once, read many logic, to be able to back up to that immutable storage option within Azure Blob. And the workflows are all built in, so it's a seamless process. Additionally, we've included a lot of enterprise scalability enhancements. We recognize that many of our organizations really have spent a lot of time migrating workloads to the cloud, refactoring apps to platform as a service, certainly having a cloud-first approach to new applications and data. And that means that there really are a lot of scalability needs to be able to back up with that policy-based approach. Veeam makes it easy to do that with version 5. We've included a ton of performance and efficiency enhancements to make sure that this is a best fit solution for large-scale Azure deployments. And then finally, if you're thinking, gosh, this sounds great, but I maybe don't want to get started right away, Community Edition may be a great option for you. You can get free Azure backup in this hybrid cloud environment using Veeam Backup and Replication. So if you want to just give it a test drive, this is now the great time to do it. So that's kind of what's new. What I want to do now is set the stage a little bit. We're going to turn it over to Seb, and he's going to spend a lot of time in the product itself. But to orient you to that demo, let me walk you through a little bit of how this architecture is designed. What you'll see here is a basic deployment of Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. Of course, we start by taking a look at Azure VMs, or in the case of databases, we may be looking at the disks, and ultimately leveraging those snapshots. That does become that first line of defense. But how do you then leverage backup to optimize your storage? To do that, we use something called workers, or a pool of workers, to be able to automate a lot of the processes to create these backups. That then enables you to be able to scale out to Azure Blob, whether that is Azure Blob Hot, Azure Blob Cool, or being able to scale out even further to Azure Archive Storage. What's new for this release is that fun little lock icon. That shows you where the immutable storage features can be entitled so that you can have immutable backup for resilient recovery in the face of a cybersecurity attack. Now, I mentioned we have flexible recovery options. This just gives you a kind of a look of how you might want to recover. Being able to recover from a snapshot is a really common use case, but you might need to recover from something in Azure Blob. You have the ability to do that all within the Veeam workflows. Now, for those who want to really think about that hybrid cloud investment, as we talked about at the beginning of the webinar here, this is an example of an architecture you might want to look at for running a policy-based approach across your environments. So you can use Veeam Backup and Replication to set policies so that you can back up Azure in the same way that you back up your VMs and physical servers in the data center. You can even, for those who have multi-cloud investments, be able to do the same principles across Amazon and Google. So you can do it all with Veeam Backup and Replication. With that, I think I've hyped everything up enough. I want to turn it over to Sebastian to walk us through a demonstration. So give me just 1 second to be able to turn over presenter rights to Sebastian. And in the meantime, Seb, do you want to take yourself off mute and introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Leah, and hello to everyone. My name is Sebastian. I'm an Insight System Engineer at Veeam, focusing on the public cloud solutions that Veeam has in our portfolio. And I must admit, I'm very excited to share with everyone what Veeam has planned to offer in the next version of Veeam Backup for Azure. So what I'll do now is I will share my screen. And the purpose of this demo is more or less to help you to get started with Veeam Backup for Azure and highlight also some of the new features that you can leverage in the upcoming release. Just like Leah mentioned, Veeam Backup for Azure is a simple to use backup and recovery tool that is designed to protect your Azure ecosystem by keeping your Azure VMs, Azure SQL databases, and Azure file shares protected at any time using only cloud native technologies. Now, let's check how easy it is to deploy the tool. And you have two straightforward options to deploy Veeam Backup for Azure. Now, if you are already familiar with Veeam Backup and Replication, which is Veeam's flagship product, our bread and butter on which we build our brand upon, in Backup Infrastructure under Manage Server, you click on the Add Server button at the top. You select Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure from the list, and you will be presented with two options. Either hook up Veeam Backup and Replication to an existing Veeam Backup for Azure appliance, or deploy a brand new one. As we are looking to do a fresh deployment, we will start and we will select the second one. By choosing this option, you will be guided through a series of steps that will trigger the creation of an Azure VM where the appliance will be deployed in the Azure tenant that you're looking to protect. And these steps include, okay, tell me the Azure credentials that I want to use in order to connect to my tenant. Fill in the subscription, the data center where you wish the appliance to be deployed, and tell me in what resource group you wish the Azure VM to be deployed to. Next, we will give it a friendly name for my VM. And in terms of networking, if Veeam Backup and Replication will deploy this appliance in one of my tenants, in one of my subscriptions, tell me in what virtual network, in what subnet, and what network security group will be applied against the newly created VM. Next, we will determine what kind of IP settings we want to associate with the Azure VM, and these ones will be used to access the appliance. And finally, specify the initial credentials, the username and password that will be used to authenticate against the appliance for the very first time. Once you hit next, the deployment process of an Azure VM with the Veeam Backup for Azure image will start. Now, if you're not familiar with the Veeam products, the second option to deploy Veeam Backup for Azure is to start the deployment directly from the Azure Marketplace. So what I'll do now is I will switch to my Azure account. I'll go to the Marketplace. We'll search for Veeam Backup. We choose one of the available flavors that we have available in the Marketplace. We hit Create, and then we select the latest version, which is version 4 of the product. And finally, similar to the first deployment option, we fill in the template by specifying the subscription, the resource group, the virtual machine name, the region, the users that we will use to authenticate against the appliance, basically mapping the exact same steps that we have seen in the first option of deploying the appliance. So to sum up the deployment process, you have two options that you can leverage to deploy the appliance, either from the Veeam Backup and Replication console or from the Azure Marketplace. In our case, I won't carry on with the creation of a brand new appliance as I've already deployed a new one, and this is Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. Now, let's check the prerequisite steps you need to do to create successful backup policies. When you connect to Veeam Backup for Azure for the first time, you will be greeted by a straightforward guide that will assist you during your initial configuration. Now, the initial config consists of 3 steps. The first step, this one, is to specify the Azure subscriptions that you'd like to protect. The second step is to configure the workers that Leah also mentioned earlier. And what we call workers are proxy VM instances that the appliance automatically spawns during the backup or the restore process of an imageable backup. So the worker will always be responsible with the interaction of repositories, performing data copy tasks, file level restores. Therefore, anytime we touch data, that's when a worker is automatically deployed. But as soon as the process is complete, meaning the backup is finished where the instances are restored, the worker instance is terminated and is no longer sitting in your Azure account. As this process is done automatically by the appliance, you just need to select the region that you'd like to protect with a particular worker. And if the appliance will spawn these workers for me in my behalf, tell me in what virtual network, tell me in what subnet, and tell me in what security group you wish to apply for these particular workers. Now going back to the third and the last step is to add a repository where your imageable backups will reside. Again, just like Leah mentioned earlier in the slides, a key new feature of Veeam Backup for Azure version 5 is that we have added a new security layer that will allow you to leverage containers with version level immutability activated. Now, this is a great asset to leverage as the immutability is an effective way to not only protect you against cybersecurity events, let's say like ransomware, but also from incidents that can destroy the, let's say, the integrity of backup data, like accidental deletion or changes. So now to add a repository, you will need to create an Azure storage account and container in your Azure ecosystem prior to completing this step. As I've already created a My Storage account, I will now click the Add button. I'll get a friendly name to my repository. I will hit Next. Then we have the option to specify, okay, in what Azure tenant you wish your backups to be saved. We'll select one in the list. And for the selected tenant, we can select, okay, give me the list of all the available storage accounts that are available in that particular tenant. Now, I will be honest with you, this is going to take a couple of seconds to load because I'm using a dev environment of a colleague of mine and he doesn't usually clean all his test accounts. So definitely who is dev on the call, yeah, definitely knows what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is the list. I have a huge list here of storage accounts. I will just search for one storage account that I know for a fact that it's immutable. I will select the storage account, hit apply, and within the selected storage account, I can select one available container. I am choosing a container that I know that has immutability turned on. And within the selected container, here, I will create a folder, let's say new backup folder. And this is the folder where my imageable backups will reside, either where we are referring to the imageable backups of Azure VMs or Azure SQL databases. Now, for this particular folder, we can also set the access tier only for this particular folder, and we can set it either to hot, cool, or archive, or we can auto create all tiers. We can leverage all of them during the creation of a backup policy. As the appliance recognizes that this is an immutable container, I will have the confirmation from Veeam Backup for Azure that my backups will be immutable. If I click Next, I should receive, and I will receive, a warning message that there will be an additional cost when using this type of repository. Why is that? Because during the time when the container is immutable, not even Veeam has access to tamper with that data. Therefore, all the data that we throw in that container, all the backups that we push into the immutable container will remain unchanged for that particular period of time. Now, our backups, we don't we don't encrypt only the data, only the backup data, but we can also add encryption at the repository level as well, either using a plain password, although to be honest, personally, I wouldn't recommend it as passwords get lost easily, but I do recommend encrypting the repository itself using the Azure cryptographic keys. I will leave this disabled for the sake of the demo. And another new addition and a key feature in the upcoming release is allowing backup admins the option to set the limit of concurrent tasks against a storage account. Now, this can come in handy, especially when you plan to protect hundreds or let's say thousands of Azure resources, and you want to make sure that the storage account you use for your imageable backups is not throttled. Many of you probably might wonder, okay, why should I care about this? Because in Azure, each storage account region has a default maximum ingress limit for the blob storage. That for US, as an example, varies between 25 and 60 gigs per second. So load balancing the number of API calls against the storage account will allow you to avoid hitting those limits on the storage account if there are too many backup policies, let's say, trying to hit the same Azure storage account. And to do a short recap of the initial configuration process, now the guide will assist you in adding the Azure tenants you'd like to protect with the appliance, configure the worker network settings. Remember that workers will be used for the creation of the imageable backups and are automatically destroyed once the backup or restore process is finished. And last but not least, specify the repository where the imageable backups will reside. Now that we know the initial configuration is completed, let's check how easy it is to configure a backup policy. As the creation of backup policies is standardized across all workloads, I will focus in more detail on the backup policies designed to protect Azure VMs and only highlight the caveats for the backup policies designed to protect, let's say, Azure SQL databases and Azure file shares. Now at the top, notice that we have separate tabs with each service that we can protect with the appliance. And under virtual machines, here I already have a backup policy designed to protect at the moment only one VM, for which I'm creating both snapshots and image level backups. So from the get-go, the appliance offers me two copies of data, one in terms of a cloud native snapshot, the other of an image level backup in the Veeam native format. If I click on edit, the first step is, okay, give it a friendly name for the backup policy. I hit next. Tell me the Veeam tenant you'd like to protect with this policy. Tell me the region or regions you'd like to protect. And if we go one step closer, either protect all resources or you can filter them down, either by subscription, resource group, virtual machine name, and to be perfectly honest, by tag. Okay, this is the most popular option. Protect all resources that have a particular tag associated to them. Next, in terms of guest processing, we can enable app-aware snapshots for Windows VMs using the VSS agent, or we can execute scripts prior or after the creation of a snapshot. In terms of targets, we can copy the source tags of the volumes and we can back those up as well. And we can also enable the creation of the Veeam imageable backups. Hit next. During the scheduling part, this is where we specify the frequency of our dailies, weeklies, monthly, and yearly backups. For the daily retention, we have an interactive calendar where we can select the hours when we want to perform either the cloud native snapshots or the imageable backups. In terms of daily retention, we specify, okay, how many snapshots you want to keep and for how long you want to keep your imageable backups. By the way, if you're using a repository with a container that is immutable, the immutable period will match the time of the retention for the image level backups. And of course, if I'm going to create daily backups, tell me what repository should I use. In terms of settings, okay, we can retry the backup policy for an X number of times, but we have also added a health check, meaning that in this example, in the first Sunday of every month, we are checking that the integrity of the backup chain is intact. And this is critical because during a restore process, or if it ever comes to a moment when I want to restore data, I want to make sure that all my backup chains are intact, and I will be able to do the restore from start to finish without any hiccups. Again, like Leah mentioned, prior to executing anything, based on the resources that we have selected to protect, and the regions and the frequency and the retention periods, the appliance offers you an estimated monthly cost for the snapshots, for the backups, for the archives, the traffic, and the transactions. This means that you will know in advance, prior to executing anything, how much this backup policy will cost you at the end of the month. Okay. Now, for Azure SQL, as I mentioned earlier, everything is standardized. However, the caveat with the Azure SQL backup policy is that instead of protecting Azure VMs, in this case, we will be protecting either Azure SQL databases or the entire Azure SQL server with all the databases that are inside that server. And we can either do a backup directly from the production server. However, just to have that database consistency in place, just to make sure that all transactions are finished and there are no pending transactions during the backup process, we can also use a staging server from where we will start the backup process. And last but not least, for Azure files, if I click on edit, again, there are two caveats here. One is, of course, with this backup policy, we will be able to protect Azure file shares. Oh, sorry. And we can either protect all Azure file shares, or we can filter them down either by resource group, file share, or by storage account. And we have also have the option, not in the free edition, but in the paid one, to enable indexes of all the snapshot. This is important during the restore process because this option turned on will allow you to query through all available restore points in one single view, locate the file and all the occurrences in all the restore points, and afterwards you can decide, okay, which file you want to restore. Now, everything is fine and dandy. We have noticed that, okay, Veeam Backup for Azure is able to protect Azure SQL databases, Azure VMs, and file shares. However, what are our options in terms of recovery? Now, for virtual machines, you can restore either the entire VM or only select specific disks from a VM, or go even one step more in granularity by doing only file level recovery. If I'm going with the first option with Azure VM, I can do a restore either from a snapshot or from an image level backup. We select the Azure tenant where we want this VM to be restored to. And we can either restore it to the original location, meaning the production Azure VM will be overwritten. And in this case, I will hit next. I will receive a warning message that my original VM will be overwritten by the one from the backup. And if it's okay with me, I can continue. I hit next. And once I click restore, the restore process starts. It's that simple. Or I can go on the second route to restore it to a new location with different settings, meaning that I can change the subscription where I want the Azure VM to be restored to. I can change the region in terms of settings. I can change the VM name. So I can rename the VM. I can also change the size of the VM, the resource group, the disk type, the availability zone. In terms of disks, I can, because I'm restoring the entire VM with all the disk, I can restore the disk as well. I will just rename the disk. And if I'm going to restore this brand new VM into a new tenant, a new subscription, a new region, tell me in what network, tell me in what security group, and in what subnet you wish this VM to be restored to. And again, when this step is configured, okay, give it a reason. Okay, I'll receive a warning message that my public IP address is already in use. I can give it a reason, hit next, and once I click restore, the entire process will start. Now, another option to restore VM is doing file level recovery. So if you only need a couple of files, a couple of folders, you don't need to restore the entire VM or the entire disk. No, we offer you the possibility to restore only those files. So in the file level recovery, we do provide you an URL that you can open in a browser window. And here you can navigate through all the files, all the folders from any restore point. For example, I'm selecting these files. I will add them to a restore list. And from the restore list, here I can select only the files, only the folders that I need, and I can download them on my local machine. Okay. Now, following the same pattern for the Azure files, I have the file share for which I can do a file level recovery. I can do the restore process from any restore point available. So all I have to do is, okay, select the account from where you want to do the restore. And now decide, okay, do I want to restore my files back to the original or to a new location? In this exercise, we'll leave to the original location, hit next, next, and start. And that's it. We have the same file level recovery URL. We open it into the browser window. And now we can navigate, again, similar to restoring files from Azure VMs, from all the files, all the folders, I can add them to a restore list. And from the restore list, I can decide, okay, I want to restore these files back to the original location by keeping the original file, if it's already there, or if it's still there, or I can override them. Okay, with the version from the backup. Now, for those who are looking for that data mobility, to have data portability, and want to follow the best practice rules in terms of data protection. And what I mean by that is the 3-2-1 rule. Have 3 copies of your data on 2 different media, one of them offsite, one of them immutable, and with 0 errors. This is where Veeam backup and replication comes into play. Is because Veeam backup and replication has an integration with Veeam Backup for Azure that allows you to take the backups from your Azure storage accounts and to either copy those backups offsite, meaning on premises or to other clouds, but also when it comes to restores, because the imageable backups that Veeam takes are platform agnostic, you will be able to restore these workloads within the Azure ecosystem, like we have seen earlier with Veeam Backup for Azure, but it also allows you the possibility to restore these workloads outside Azure, either on premises, again, either on premises or to other clouds, okay? And how do you do that? Again, under Manage Servers, add server, Veeam Backup from Microsoft Azure. Here you can connect to an existing appliance. If, let's say, this one was deployed from the Azure Marketplace, or if the appliance was deployed from Veeam Backup and Replication, the integration is already done. So everything is seamless. So now, if I go to Home under Jobs, here I have visibility across all my backup policies that I have configured in Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. I do have visibility across my backup policies that I have configured with Veeam Backup for Google Cloud, because we have the same product to protect all major cloud vendors on the market. For on-premises, from AWS. Therefore, the tool also offers you one single pane of glass where you'll have visibility across all your backup policies. And when it comes to restores, you can either restore a snapshot, okay, back to Azure. Why is that? Because snapshots are cloud proprietary. You will be able to restore those snapshots only within the cloud native environment. But because we are creating imageable backups as well, we can restore this imageable backup back to on-premises or in an on-premises environment using the instant recovery option that Veeam provides, or restore it to AWS, let's say, back to Azure or to Google Cloud. Okay. And last but not least, I've also mentioned that, okay, what happens if I want to have multiple copies of my data within Azure and outside Azure? I can create a backup copy job. So for any workloads that I have in Azure, I can select the policy, or not the policy, in this case, the Azure VM that I am protecting. And in terms of target, in this case, I can create a backup job and have my backups copied from Azure back to on-premises, like in this example. Or with version 12 of Veeam Backup Vendor Application, we will be able to write directly to other object storages like AWS S3, Google Cloud, so on and so forth. So we specify the target and then the frequency of synchronizing the backups between the two clouds. Either copy the data continuously or during specific time frames. Okay. And from this step onwards, once this process is completed, Veeam Backup Vendor Application takes care of the rest, copying the data outside of Azure and doing the restores outside Azure as well. There, I think my part is done. So what I will do next is I will give you presenter rights.
Great. All right. Well, I hope everybody really enjoyed that. Sebastian spends a tremendous amount of time in front of customers like you. So I think he really included a lot of amazing insights and best practices and things to think about throughout the demonstration. If you do want your own personalized demonstration, please feel free to reach out through veeam.com and we're happy to get you set up with a demo. Sebastian may even be the one doing it. But let's go ahead and wrap up with just a few pieces of information about how you can get started with this solution. There are 3 entitlement options for Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure. The first, as I mentioned at the top of the call, is free. You can deploy it through the Azure Marketplace and back up to 10 instances of Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure, which is fantastic. But for most of you on the call, you may actually want to go ahead and get started now. Some of our users do deploy Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure standalone via the marketplace. Now, the important thing to note here is this does not include the connection to Veeam Backup and Replication.